Let's talk about tariffs, the kind that make global economists sweat. Not the boring textbook kind, but the kind that can send shockwaves through boardrooms, living rooms, and even the aisles of your local supermarket. In 2025, the world watched as a trade war erupted on a scale few had ever imagined. Earlier this year, the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and their new partners, slapped a 100% tariff on a wide range of American goods. This wasn't just a policy tweak. It was a thunderclap that echoed across continents, targeting everything from electronics to soybeans. This wasn't a gentle nudge, it was an economic earthquake. The aftershocks rattled financial districts from New York to Shanghai, leaving investors and governments scrambling to assess the damage. Markets spun into chaos as everyone scrambled to understand what this meant for their jobs, savings, and the price of a Ford F-150. Suddenly, the cost of everyday goods and big-ticket items alike became a guessing game, with families and businesses caught in the crossfire. The BRICS bloc had long resented a global system rigged for the US and its dollar. For years, they'd watched as the US shaped the rules of trade and finance, often at their expense. This tariff was a declaration: we're done playing by your rules. It was a bold, public statement that the old order was no longer acceptable, and that new alliances were being forged in real time. Overnight, American products became twice as expensive in some of the world's biggest markets. Shelves that once overflowed with US brands now sat half empty, as shoppers did double-takes at the new price tags. Suddenly, a tractor in India or software in Brazil cost double. For millions, the American dream, at least the part you could buy, was suddenly out of reach, forcing people to look for alternatives. The goal? Make American goods uncompetitive and force a reaction from Washington. The message was clear: adapt or risk being left behind in a new world order. For decades, the world ran on the US dollar. These tariffs were a direct assault on that reality, challenging the very foundation of global trade and finance. By making US goods unaffordable, BRICS forced their own economies to trade with each other in their own currencies. This was more than just a trade dispute. It was a push to build a parallel system, one that could rival the dollar's dominance. This was the first major shot in a new kind of war, not over land, but over the future of money. The battlefield was global finance, and the weapons were tariffs, currencies, and alliances. As of October 2025, it's clear: this is just the beginning of a very messy economic divorce. The world is watching, and no one knows how far the split will go, or who will come out on top. The world order is shifting, and the stakes couldn't be higher. As alliances realign and old certainties crumble, the only thing that's certain is that the global economy will never be the same again. You've probably heard the name BRICS floating around in the news. No, it's not a new breakfast cereal or a trendy tech startup. BRICS is actually a powerful club of emerging giants: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and joining a bit later, South Africa. These countries, each with their own unique strengths and challenges, came together to form a group that would shake up the global order. Think of them as the Avengers of the global economy. Each member brings something different to the table. But together, they're united by a common goal: to challenge the dominance of the US dollar and the Western-led financial system. Originally, BRICS was just a loose alliance, but in 2024, they made a bold move and expanded their ranks. Now Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia have joined the club, making it a truly global force with members from Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. With this expansion, BRICS suddenly represented over a third of the world's economic output. That's a massive share of global GDP, and it means their decisions can ripple across the entire planet. The group now includes both major oil producers and some of the world's biggest consumers. This gives them serious leverage. They can decide what currency to use for trade, and lately, they're making it clear they're tired of relying on the US dollar for everything. Their ultimate goal? To create a multipolar world, where power isn't concentrated in just one country's hands. They want a system where America isn't the only one calling the shots, and where more voices are heard on the world stage. Of course, it's not all smooth sailing. There are plenty of internal rivalries and disagreements, but despite their differences, these countries are united in one thing: reducing their dependence on the West and building a new kind of global partnership. BRICS isn't just asking for a seat at the table anymore, they're building their own table, inviting new members, and making sure it gets bigger and more influential every year. The balance of global power is shifting fast, and BRICS is right at the center of this transformation, shaping the future of international relations and the world economy. Faced with a rising BRICS, the US didn't opt for diplomacy. It reached for tariffs. Even before BRICS acted, President Trump threatened 100% tariffs if they challenged the dollar. When BRICS ignored the warning, the US slapped a 10% tariff on all BRICS goods. But it didn't stop there. US allies, the EU, Japan, South Korea, were hit with 15% tariffs and told not to retaliate. The message, pay for America's reindustrialization, or lose access to the US market. This wasn't negotiation, it was economic strong-arming. The US treated allies as vassals, demanding investments and submission. The result? Decades-old alliances strained and the world pushed closer together against American pressure. The tariff hammer set the stage for a global backlash. BRICS didn't just take the hit, they accelerated their plans to escape the dollar. De-dollarization, once a talking point, became urgent policy. The 100% tariffs were just the start. BRICS began trading in their own currencies, building a cross-border payment system to bypass the US-dominated SWIFT network. This move lets countries like Russia and Iran sidestep Western sanctions. Another step dumping US Treasury bonds, which once funded American spending. Now BRICS is selling off US debt, putting pressure on the dollar, and making it harder for the US to borrow. While a single BRICS currency is still a dream, these steps are already eroding dollar dominance. Each transaction outside the dollar chips away at America's economic foundation. The financial world is splitting in two. America's closest allies felt the squeeze too. Japan was forced to invest $550 billion in the US, with Washington taking 90% of the profits. Public outrage toppled Japan's prime minister. Europe faced 15% tariffs and had to invest over $600 billion in the US, plus buy American energy and weapons. EU leaders admitted, Europe is now dependent on the US. South Korea got the same treatment, tariffs, forced investments, and even ICE raids on Korean workers in Georgia. Allies felt betrayed, forced to pay for the privilege of friendship. While BRICS sold off US debt, European central banks bought more, tying themselves tighter to America. The world split, some breaking free from the dollar, others pulled deeper in. Here's the secret about tariffs. Americans pay them. That 10% tariff on BRICS goods, it's a 10% price hike on everything from electronics to coffee. Small businesses and farmers are hit hardest, costs rise, exports dry up, and jobs are lost. The promise is more manufacturing jobs, but only a fraction of Americans want to work in factories. Meanwhile, the policies scare off foreign investors and skilled workers needed for new industries. The result, higher prices, disrupted supply chains, and a squeeze on American families. The grand economic war has a real price tag, paid at the checkout counter. America First comes with a bill, and it's landing on Main Street. Push rivals together, and they'll unite against you. US tariffs turned BRICS from a divided group into a focused alliance. Old rivalries, like India and China, were set aside to counter American pressure. The threat of exclusion from the US-led system forced BRICS to cooperate on new payment networks and dump US debt. Washington's strategy became a catalyst, accelerating the creation of a real alternative to the Western order. The US, trying to isolate its rivals, ended up forging a stronger, more unified opposition. In the long run, a coordinated BRICS is a far bigger threat than a fractured one. America's short-term wins may have set up a long-term loss. So, what does all this mean? We're witnessing a profound shift in the global financial landscape, one that could reshape economies, trade, and even the balance of power for decades to come. The world's financial system, long dominated by the US dollar, is becoming a multi-player game. New players are stepping onto the field, each bringing their own ambitions and strategies. The dollar's role as the world's reserve currency gave America power and privilege, allowing it to borrow cheaply, influence global markets, and enforce sanctions with ease. But now, BRICS expansion and US tariff policies have created a perfect storm, challenging the old order and accelerating calls for change. BRICS is building its own financial infrastructure, payment networks, trade in local currencies, and new institutions designed to bypass traditional Western systems. The dollar won't vanish overnight, but its influence is shrinking as more countries seek alternatives and diversify their reserves. For America, this means higher borrowing costs, weaker sanctions, and a need to adapt to a world where its financial dominance is no longer guaranteed. For businesses and consumers, it means more volatility and uncertainty. Currencies may fluctuate, prices could swing, and global investments might become riskier. For the world, it's a move toward a more balanced, multipolar economy, where no single nation holds all the cards. The era of US financial dominance is ending in slow motion, with each year bringing new challenges and opportunities for global cooperation, or competition. The actions of 2025 will be remembered as a turning point, a year when the world's financial architecture began to look fundamentally different. The world is fracturing into competing blocks, each vying for influence and security in an uncertain future. The dollar must now learn to share the spotlight, as a new era of global finance begins, one defined by competition, collaboration, and constant change.